start. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So from the Declaration of Independence. That defines the beginning of the American dream. That's the first American dream, right? Was the separation to create a nation that had opportunity, life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness. And that when we think about the American dream, that's really where everything starts. And so in the 50s, the big deal was a home with a white picket fence, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and 2.5 children, right? That was kind of the ideal picture of the American dream. And that has changed over the years slightly, but there's a drive toward the American dream sometimes being based upon what you have, based upon what you own, or based upon how much money you make. And I don't think that's always the best description for the American dream. The American dream is having a life, the ability to live, and live life free, to have liberty. That is part of the American dream. And that's one of the key components. And that's liberty across the board in your perspectives, in your religion, in your beliefs, in how you work. And the other is pursuit of happiness. I think that there are a lot of people who think that the American dream is happiness, and that you're entitled, that everyone makes you happy, but that is not true. It is the pursuit of happiness, and that puts it on us to pursue it. It takes effort to reach whatever you define as the American dream. If your American dream is the white picket fence house with 2.5 kids, then that's fine. But you have to pursue that. And that takes effort, and that takes hard work. And what our country is founded on is providing that opportunity that allows you the freedom so that you can pursue that. The state of Tennessee passed a law a few years ago that provided free junior college education for everyone in the state of Tennessee who graduates from college. You can go to junior college for free. It's paid for. I don't know that that was the best thing, because I think you get what you pay for sometimes, right? And so what we are seeing now is the evidence that's coming out of Tennessee is, in some respects, it's worked for some people. For others, it has not. We've had a lower level of quality of education coming out, and some of those programs are struggling. I think providing access is critical for the education, but you have to have some students who are wanting to pursue that. That it's not something that they are expected to do, but they have the opportunity to do. And that then builds on everything else, on what it means to reach your goals and to have your dream. So what is the American dream? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, in my opinion. And then that shapes out differently for everyone. But I think that's a good frame for our discussion today. Thank you.
I would like for you to welcome Dr. Renetta Elaine, Dean of Stafford School of Business at Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College.
Good afternoon, y'all. I don't know why you're dispersed in a different part of the room, but it's okay. My name is Renata Elad, and I'm the Dean of the Stafford School of Business. I guess I got invited to the idea of happiness. I don't know if I agree with that entirely, primarily because I'm an economist in training, and I believe this system is built on capitalism, where freedom of choice and freedom of enterprise, along with private property rights and limited role of government, are one of the primary pillars of the economy. So when you say it's a government that's supposed to provide you happiness, I kind of tend to take another view to that. In addition, another person described it as social and education. Find a good job, live a decent life, and you can live longer. And that was kind of the way the previous generation and the generation before it did things. And I was taught that's the way I should do it, and hopefully the one after me. But then a UN study in 2017 found out that, yes, most people do live longer, and they also are more educated than their predecessors, and they have access to a lot more goods and services. However, it does not mean that they have the same quality of life, or their life is what they would describe as is drastically happier than the one before it. Spending more time earning an education does not directly correlate to social mobility or economic wealth. Living longer does not directly correlate to having a happy life. So these basic conditions of what we thought of as the basis for social and economic mobility really do not hold, at least in my opinion, not as well as I thought they should. And then when I look at the area where I live in South Georgia, in the southern part of the United States. There was an economist, a Harvard economist, by Raj Chidi. I think in 2013, he did a study on social mobility, and he found out that, in his words, it was the access to the resources that generate social mobility are not as equal as we would like them to be. In fact, he found out that people in the West or in the Midwest were more likely to be socially mobile and economically mobile than people in the South. That happens to be where I live. So, and he said some of the things that could be causal factors are segregation, income inequality, local school quality, social capital, and family structures. I don't know to what extent those are related to lack of social and economic mobility, but I'm pretty sure some of you might find they are correlated to lack of mobility. So, in addition to that, Tifton itself, that we live in, or Tift County, 30% of the people in Tifton live below what is described as poverty levels, with 40% of the kids living in households below poverty levels. I guess that kind of buttresses his point that he's making, that social mobility is not equally distributed within the US. There's also a research that shows that people living in poor areas over time tend to have even more impediments beyond those around their individual circumstances. So the neighborhood is poor, your individual household is poor, it tends to exacerbate the situation, making it even worse than what it is. Also, those areas tend to have limited opportunities for residents to advance. So the whole concept of the American myth as being everybody can pursue happiness, or everybody can attain wealth to the level of their desires, or the concept of social and economic mobility, in my point of view, is something that needs to be strived towards, but it's not a given. Like anywhere else, it is not a given. What can we do to strive towards that? Unfortunately, I don't have the answers to that. I hope that's going to be part of the discussion today. Thank you.
Hi, please welcome our next guest, Ms. Elma Young. He has a master's and is director of CAMP, the College Assistant Migrant Program at VSU at Valdosta State University.
Okay, so remind me of your name. Sergio. Yes, Sergio tried to describe what my program does. CAMP stands for College Assistance Migrant Program, and we are funded by the Department of Education, $2.1 million grant to support students who are dependents or themselves do agricultural work. 98 to 100% of my students each year happen to be of Hispanic, Latino backgrounds. However, race is not a requirement for the program. As long as you have that agricultural background and you have a financial need, you can qualify. However, most of the agricultural work in the area is performed by Hispanic or Latinos. And I'm gonna speak from a personal perspective. I am an immigrant as well. I was born in Mexico, and I came to this country with the clothes on my back. Now to directing a $2.1 million federal grant, having a master's in education. That's definitely my parents' American dream, because that's what they came to this country for. But personally, I definitely have experienced the realities as well as the myths of, again, the American dream. I was able to attend college through camp. I was a camper, that's what we call ourselves, about 15 years ago. And now, working with the program, I see that there's a lot of barriers for my students, as well as for myself as a professional, due to the background and the difficulty in attaining this dream that we have. For one, our students, my students, 100% of them are first generation. Their parents have never had an education. Most of them can barely read or write in their native language. And once they come to college, it's very difficult for them to get through, even though our program pays 100% for their tuition, housing, meal plan, books, you name it, so that they can focus. But they still have many different things going on at home, such as their parents' health, financial situations that prevents them from focusing in college and attaining that degree. And that's something that my students are very much aware of, that they see all these different barriers that is gonna prevent them from achieving that dream because, you know, as I mentioned, being first generation, being low income, being migrant, seasonal farm workers moving from place to place, not having parents that can sit down with them and do homework and developing the study skills, doing homework every night, developing a schedule, even just being, not having that cultural background, such as going to museums or going to a Broadway play, delays them once they actually go into college. So our program, we have to work extra hard to bring them at least halfway to the rest of the other students. Now, personally, I work at Valdosta State, and an education has definitely helped me as far as, you know, first generation, low income, immigrant, migrant, Hispanic, but I know that there's still white men that make a lot more money than I do, because that's how society is, and that's how things are right now in the United States. And, you know, blacks and African Americans, they tell us that education is the great equalizer, and unfortunately it's not for those of us that are of a different race or a different color. But that is, again, the American dream is whatever you want it to be. Like I said, for my parents, the American dream is me. They've already achieved that. Me, I'm still searching for it. I mean, I have a great family. I'm very happy. I love my job. But I think there's more, and I will hope that all of you help me find out what that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And next, we have Professor Troy Spicer, RN, MS, FNP, BC of the Health Center of ABAC. Please welcome him.
Thank you. I appreciate Dr. Kleisman and Lauren and Sergio for the invitation to come speak to you guys. I'm a substitute, so I've had to really catch up on this in the last 2 days, all right? So I'll try to do the subject a decent treatment. My understanding, having looked at that YouTube video, is this guy has taken a fairly easy number that people are able to boil down, called the gross domestic product, and then compare it to something that's perhaps a little more difficult to define. And he calls it what was it called? The social progress index. It's the first time I'd ever heard of it, so I've tried to read up on it real quick. The closest thing I've ever heard of anything similar to this is I read a book that's sort of like a pop book that was called The Happiest Place on Earth or something like that. I forget the name of it, but it was a book, and it was about all the countries in the world who are the happiest people. And one of the findings in this book, and these, I don't know if they were sociologists or anthropologists or what they were, they found that what made people happy had less to do with material things than it did basically meeting your needs with maybe just a little bit left over and enough time to have some fun, right? And it's places like Costa Rica, and it's places like, I don't know, Finland, New Zealand, and other places that it's certainly not places like Kuwait or the United Arab Emirates or somewhere like that, right? Which apparently scores really low. The people aren't very happy, and they lead very, very controlled and miserable lives in some cases. So I looked at it that way, and then I looked at it like one of the things he measures is health care and meeting health care needs. And the thing that immediately struck me is that of all the things you can talk about that meet those sort of basic needs, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs of shelter and safety and that sort of thing, healthcare is the least linear of any of them. All the rest of them, basically eating and getting enough to eat is a function of having access to food and food security. And for thousands of years, it's easy to do. Either you have enough to eat or you don't have enough to eat, right? Healthcare is a different story. The whole phenomenon of healthcare is within really the last 100 to 150 years. You all realize this, right? Before that, clean back to the dawn of man, healthcare was rendered by shamans, witch doctors, bone setters, and people that might help you survive childbirth if you were lucky, right? It wasn't fancy, didn't involve a lot of technology, and it wasn't very efficacious, right? But then the revolution started sometime around or about, well, first of all, I'll make this point, that you all know from being in college that the Age of Enlightenment was like the dawn of sort of modern man, right? I mean, that's like the Jeffersonian era where scientific knowledge and knowledge about the way societies work and government works, it really, really, really exploded. And life got a lot better in a lot of different ways during that time in the 1700s. But the Age of Enlightenment did nothing to improve health care. You were just as likely to die of an abscessed tooth in 1900 as you were in 1800, as you were in 1700, as you were 25, 50,000 years ago. It was deadly, right? We have to wait on this thing he calls healthcare or whatever much later, within the last 100 years or so. So I guess one of the things that strikes me about the hierarchy of the way he talks about it in the video is that essentially, and Dr. Eli, help me out with this, what you're worried about is how efficiently you change a dollar into healthcare, correct? And there's a slope to it that's really quick. It's stuff like you get rid of crowding, you give decent nutrition to pregnant women, you give access to basic hygiene and that sort of thing, and clean air and water and that kind of stuff, and the slope is really, really, really sharp, right? you get to the top of the slope and you start talking about antibiotics and treatments and that sort of thing, and that helps a good bit. You get to the very top and you start talking about making people live longer because you're able to do cardiac surgery on them or take out their cancer or offer them really fancy treatments with medicines and x-rays to treat their cancers, and you squeeze the last little drop out of it, and it's very, 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 very expensive. So these countries like Costa Rica that score high have gotten a lot of benefit out of basic stuff. And it's things like when a woman in the mountains is pregnant, she will come down out of the mountains into the towns where there's at least a decent place where they can do a C-section if they need to in an emergency, and live the last month of her pregnancy, and it's supported by the government. That has the effect of really drastically reducing infant mortality rates and increasing longevity rates and lifespan rates in that particular country. And by any way you could talk about it, it improves the quality of life for these people, right? But here we are in this country, we're spending increasingly expensive, increasingly large amounts of money on increasingly expensive technologies that is doing less and less and less to really help us. So if you wanted the truth of the matter, the sorry fact of the matter is this, that you can live to be 55 years old in Haiti. You can live to be maybe 60 years old in Nigeria. You can live to be 78 years old in the United States, and you can live to be 82 years old in Costa Rica or Japan. But the fact of the matter is that there's a limit to quality of life. Like, there is absolutely no evidence out there that the number of years you leads to an increase in the number of years of quality of life. It's like you've got about 70, 75, or 80 good years, and then the last, if you did squeeze 80 to 90 or 95 or 100, you're going to be miserable, right? So I just don't know, like, I see what he's trying to do, but I just can't, like, totally buy into it, I guess. Like maybe some other people could or disciplines could or whatever. I just basically think that as far as the American dream goes, and the way I defined it is that the American dream is the promise that if you work hard, you'll be treated fairly, that's justice, and you will succeed. I don't know really what, how we can move that. We're spending 20%, a fifth of the domestic product on health care and everything. If we spend it more efficiently, or if we spent another 5%, what difference would it make? I'm not sure it's a whole lot. I also, one last thing I'll say right quick is that with regards to healthcare in general, I told you that the science of healthcare is like impacting these things very contemporaneously, but it's also, we're right now in a huge paradigm change, and the paradigm change is this, is that we're doing stuff right now on a piecemeal basis to make you healthy, but we're on the verge of, like, to deliver healthcare, we're going to need your genome, and your genome is going to tell us exactly what the designer drug to treat your cancer is going to do, or how you metabolize the drug, that sort of thing. And so I think the next real sort of paradigm change in healthcare is going to be like, how much loss of privacy and autonomy are we willing to allow to squeeze out another one of these years that we're really not sure is going to lead to any more quality of life. Okay, so that would be that. I hope I haven't depressed you too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Spicer, and the rest of our panelists. We are so grateful for your perspective, your insight, and sharing with your specific area of expertise. Now we're going to break into roundtable discussion, and each professor is going to go to a table. We have four circles set up, so the audience can speak with each professor for a few minutes, probably about 10 minutes each, so that we can have a dialogue about social progress, the American dream, what it means to you, questions you might have, perspectives you want to share, and your personal experience as well. And if you all would like to do that now, and we'll move on to the next section.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Is there not four?
Yeah, I think we just have one group, that might work better. And since Johnny's already sitting
One
over there.
roundtable discussion.
We'd all just go over there. Do you need to? Oh, okay, good.